is said that a country owns an army. But today, we are going to talk about a country which is owned by an army. Born 7 decades ago, this so called democracy has been under 33 years of military rule, and none of its prime minister have ever completed his full 5 years tenure. Yes, you guessed it right. I'm talking about our most favorite neighbor, quote unquote, Pakistan. Jai Hind viewers, my name is Shivam Chandelier, and I am here to welcome you to our new Indospheric Kutniti podcast in Global Eye Intelligence. Today, to explain the topic in detail, we have with us diplomat Ajay Bisaria. He has been a commissioner of India to Canada till June 2022. He earlier served as a High Commissioner to India to Pakistan and as Ambassador to Poland and Lithuania. He is now a distinguished fellow with Observer Research Foundation, where he specializes in geopolitics and economic diplomacy with a regional focus on Eurasia, South Asia, and North America. Welcome, sir. We are really honored to have you on our show.
Great to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, sir, before we start, as we know the different things happening in our neighborhood, so I have prepared some set of questions. But before we start, I would like to ask you about the Baluchistan incident happened, and a little. I mean, I cannot stop myself from, my curiosity that whether this incident should be considered as just a tactical thing done by a BLA, or it's a step towards the liberation, a strategic step towards the liberation.
Yes, so I think we are seeing the headlines, and it is a very serious attack, and it represents two or three different things. One, it represents the dysfunction of the Pakistani security state and its inability to control such incidents, its intelligence failure, and its inability to counter an insurgency which goes to such a level that they can hijack an entire train. So I think it represents a failure of the Pakistani state in controlling the law and order situation in the country. Now, it represents a few other things also, because what it also demonstrates is that the security state doesn't have the bandwidth to have political solutions to political problems. Because what you must remember is that the Balochi insurgency, and this is being called the fifth insurgency, so it's got a history of many decades, and it has an off and on component which is violent, and also a component which is political. And what the state has been unable to do is have a political conversations. Normally, many states face insurgencies, but there is a political a sort of strand to the conversation to address it, and there is a military stand or a hard power strand also. And what the Pakistani state has demonstrated is that it is unable to come up with a political solution. Whatever its historical background, this problem has been around for more than 7 decades. And the state by now should have negotiated a kind of settlement on this issue, but it gets worse and worse. The insurgency gets worse, and part of the reason is that the politics does not have much credibility. So the Pakistani state is running this insurgency, or dealing with this insurgency completely as a law and order problem, and not politically engaging with a very serious movement which is about enforced disappearances, justice, rights, and so on. So I think all this has combined, and what we see is the latest and ugliest episode of this insurgency, but it's not something new. It has carried on for a long, long time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So basically, sir, they are just looking at it as a law and order problem only, and they do not see them as a strategic problem to the Pakistani integration.
Exactly. So they are not addressing it as a political issue should be addressed, which is that in the periphery of a country is a province which has a lot of grievances. and historical grievances because of the mistakes made by the Pakistani state. But they continue to address it as a law and order problem. The likely scenario is that after this incident, there will be another crackdown, and that will have a cycle of more resentment because all the political resentment has been against the past actions of the Pakistan army, where lots of Balochis have faced either extrajudicial killings or enforced disappearances or abductions. There's supposed to be more than 5,000 freedom fighters or insurgents, whatever you call them, who are in the custody of the army, or no one knows whether they are alive or dead. So I think all this points to the need to for the state to address this issue politically as well, but it doesn't seem to have the appetite or the ability to do that right now.
Yes, but so that takes me to my first question, and my research showed me that the political acumen, I should say, or political quotient, I would say, in the Pakistan is very less. Whether it is the army, whether it's the civilians, because in introduction, I mean, while researching, I got that 33 years of military rule in 70 years of life. So, and while researching also, I got to know about something about deep state and their idea of democracy. We both born at the same time, and the background of us, both of us, is same. We got the legacy from the Britishers only, the legacy of the politics. Then why the Pakistan is facing this issue of continuous military rule and the puppet rulers as of now, and no prime minister is able to complete his tenure. But India is successfully completing its every tenure, and there has been no issue, and there has been no military coup.
Yes, so I think I've talked about this at length in my book, and part of the reason is that the two countries in the formative years had a different trajectory. Also, the foundational reason I would argue is that Pakistan was born in some confusion and continued to live in confusion of its own identity. So that has been one of the chief foundational reasons for the fact that the military got a disproportionate hold. Even if you see the first couple of decades of the countries, India got independence in 47 at the same time as you said, but by 1950 India had a constitution, and India was fortunate to have continuity in leadership. Jawaharlal Nehru and the early leaders were around for a long time. Jawaharlal Nehru himself for 17 years. While in Pakistan, the Jinnah passed away after creating Pakistan without really defining a vision of what that future Pakistan would be. And Liaquat Ali Khan, the prime minister, passed away in 1951. So Pakistan tried to make a constitution by 1956. It succeeded partially, but by 1958, the army took over. And therefore, they had a very checkered leadership, and they had a situation of the army getting disproportionate control of the country. And even though you said that, in 33 years, army ran the country, even for the rest of the years, it was either civilian rule, a civilian facade to army rule, or a hybrid regime at best. And therefore, the army has been had a disproportionate hold, and therefore it tends to govern the country, looking at it from a security standpoint. So, if all the only instrument you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, and you want to address every problem militarily. So I think that would explain broadly the over militarized, over securitized Pakistani state, and its tendency to address every problem as a security problem.
Yes, sir. But if we see, sir, the military does not also a single integrated unit. We continuously see the conflict between the military chiefs since their independence, and even then the conflict comes to the civilian background. civilian and military, I mean, the conflict comes to the military becomes one unit. Then there is a fraction of people who are more loyal to ISI, and this conflict is always going on. I mean, is that a structural problem in the idea of Pakistan, or it is just a normal human behavior?
I would argue that the Pakistani army is a fairly cohesive unit. It has been fairly cohesive. It has, of course, faced a lot of internal rebellions and internal insurgencies and internal dissent. But by and large, the army chief is in control of it, and it's a hierarchical structure, and power emanates from the top, from the army chief. But having said that, what we see, particularly, we saw it in 1971 when the army was defeated in Bangladesh. The civilians were on top. So Zulfikar Ali Bhutto managed to take power and hold power for a decade and keep the army in check. But in recent times, what the army has perfected is the art of the hybrid regime, or the regime with a civilian facade. And therefore, what it is doing is controlling the country through its military power, while at the same time losing popularity. So, unfortunately for the army, it has lost popularity among the people. The people have seen through the game. And in the last elections in Pakistan, for instance, last year, the vote overwhelmingly was an anti-army and pro-Imran Khan's PTI vote. But the army decided that it will not give Imran Khan a chance, and had its own regime installed with the Sharif brothers to run the country. So that remains the problem of the army. Yes, you're right. It is facing internal dissent, internal dissension. A lot of people are questioning the legitimacy of the army from within its system as well. But by and large, the army, with all the levers of power, the army chief, continues to be in power using the ISI and other methods.
Yes, sir, but that I would like to understand. I mean, that the army chief is using hammer only. Like the after the incident when Imran Khan got arrested, all civilians barred into the chief of the army staffs and corps commanders' houses. So this shows that there is a dissent between the people on the streets and the military. They do not see army as the last solution, as always they used to be, used to think. And that coming to you discussed about the confusion of identity thing, and I've also uh, read this in writings of Tilak Dubeshwar sir and Sushant Sareen. Then all talks about the confusion of identity. So what do actually Pakistani think themselves as identity? Like we read in our history books that our civilization started with Indus Valley, then Guptas, Mauryas, and everything. So how do Pakistani see their history, sir?
Absolutely. So if you see Pakistani textbooks, you will see an official synthetic narrative of what that identity should be. It In a normal country, they would have recognized their identity coming from the Indus Valley civilization, being part of the Indian subcontinent, being part of the British Empire, and then emerging from it. But the synthetic identity said that we are not South Asians, we are probably descended from the Arabs, and we had the Arab invaders who came in the 8th century to Sindh, and we are descendants of them. And also, there was a sense, because of the whole partition process and the Pakistan movement, of saying that we are a country which is the other of India. So everything India is, we are not. Rather than embracing that identity of having been part of India and now developing a new nationality and identity, they said we are not India. And therefore, it was a religion-based identity, and it could not, the two-nation theory on which this identity was being constructed could not explain why so many Muslims were left behind in India and chose not to go to Pakistan, nor did it explain why East Pakistan or Bangladesh would split and leave this West Pakistan despite having a common religion. So there were multiple other strands of identity that it did not recognize. And this continues to be the problem. There is a Balochi identity. At this point of time, there is a Sindhi identity, there is a Pashtun identity, and the Punjabi domination of the armed forces and of the Pakistan state does not have space to recognize all these identities and give them their due.
Yes, and that was the reason because I think the only string they think between the pearls is that they have a common religion, whether it's a Balochi, whether it's Afghani who has come from Afghanistan, or or from Bangladesh, people living in Bangladesh always thought that they are only Muslims and that's why they are integrated together, and the ethnic identities were not given, and we are seeing the consequences of that with the Baluchis and problems in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So, sir, you have spent a lot of time in Pakistan. Also, you have have written a book on it. So, we would not just trying to restrict this to the Balochistan issue, but trying to structurally understand Pakistan from all lenses, from economics, from politics, from the military and everything. So, now coming to the economics thing, they have been, I think, as far as I remember, 24 installments have been approved of IMF, and uh, and in 70s 80s their economy was doing at par with India, or I think it was better from India. Then they were always open. They did not follow socialism, proper socialism like us. Then why did they start falling after 90s? I mean, why there was sudden uh, different movements in our economies?
So one way to look at Pakistan, contemporary Pakistan, is to see that it is currently going through a polycrisis. And that polycrisis has a political element, an economic crisis, and a security crisis. So what we've seen the expression of in the last couple of days is the security crisis has suddenly blown up. And this periodically happens. But as you're saying, and I would say, certainly agree that, the biggest crisis that the Pakistani state possibly faces is the economic crisis. And that is not a result of recent acts, but of cumulative mismanagement of the economy. And that comes from structural reasons. As you said, it is the 24th IMF program, and Pakistan habitually goes to the IMF to get over its crisis, and then every 2 or 3 years it has to go for a fresh IMF loan because it does not manage to kickstart the economy. And part of the reason is that the economy, right from the 50s, has been in the grip of the army. And they failed to do what India did. They failed to do the land reforms of the 1950s, which would have freed one factor of production. They failed to do the kind of reforms India did when it went to the IMF in 1991. Across the board, reforms in capital markets, currency, and so on. So, and structurally, the army controls the economy, imagining that it is the best arbiter of how the economy should be run. So it directly runs about $20 billion worth of enterprises, which are all the Fauji foundations and the Shaheen foundations and so on. But it also indirectly controls large swathes of the economy, making it a very inefficient economy because of this structural reason. And that is why it keeps failing. And the other elements of this poly crisis make it worse. They reinforce each other. So when you have a security crisis like the one you've had in Balochistan, you won't have more investment because investors will see a huge risk to investing in Pakistan from overseas. Even the Chinese are now getting spooked by all that is happening in Balochistan. So investment dries up, and also you have a political crisis because you're running a fake government based on the army's determination and putting the most popular leader and its most popular party mostly in jail. So there is political tension in society. All that aggravates each of the elements of this crisis, and they could all come together in a perfect storm and produce a very huge challenge for Pakistan in the very near future.
Right, sir. Right. So, specifically talking about the economy, sir, I don't think they are less of resources. The western part of the Pakistan is full of natural resources, whether it's Baluchistan, natural gases. So, it is enough for a domestic economy and I think for exports as well. And yesterday I was listening to some experts and he said he mentioned that in Baluchi there is a saying that जो भी बलूच बच्चा पैदा होता है वो पैर रखते ही सोने पे पैर रखता है because there are so much resources in their land. And if we see the Indus Valley, I mean the Sindh area and the Punjab area, it is very agriculturally productive. And in India, we say that they have got the productive part of the Punjab. So the agriculture is there, so the base is there, the mining sector is there. So primary sector, they have the resources for the primary sector. And manufacturing, I don't think in starting they had any problem. But why they have not been growing or capitalizing it, whether it is the army who wants to control everything and do not want to let loose the power to the bureaucrats or to the political, or they do not have the actual training like we have. Like the bureaucrats control the economy, or the bureaucrats, we have the whole structure of civilian administration. And army specifically for security purposes, and then judiciary for, I mean, they do not have this separate. I mean, I want to understand whether it's structural or it is just that they are armies living at its whims and fancies, and they want to control everything.
I would agree with you that this is a structural problem. And this is a structural problem because of the nature of the Pakistani state and the resources, the population, the location, everything argues for a situation where if Pakistan had the right set of priorities and a set of policies from its inception, it would have been a country which is much better off and the economy would have done much better. But because of the structural problem of the army and its belief that it can run the economy, but its inability to do so, is that the economy got worse and worse and worse. And, there was also another factor at play that while the economy was being mismanaged all these years, till at least 2021, Pakistan was getting what we call geopolitical rents, which means based on its location, the other major powers in the region found it useful to engage with Pakistan and continue to give it resources, whether it was China or the US in the past, or the Saudi Arabia for whatever reason. But since the Americans left in 2021 from Afghanistan, we've had a situation where the geopolitical use of Pakistan has gone down. And therefore, this economic problem can't be disguised anymore. They cannot freely get the kind of funds they were getting simply for being hired guns or junior partners of a War play or of an American interest in Afghanistan in the Great War on Terror. So I think all this adds up, but it is essentially structural. There is no fundamental deficiency in Pakistan in terms of resources, either natural or human.
Okay. So one more thing I read that the Pakistanis, the government, I mean the civilian government and the military is kind of officially has an agreement that foreign policy, international relations, Kashmir issue is with whether it is a pure, properly elected government in the civilian setup or whether it is a puppet government. So these three major things like international relations, foreign policy, and the Kashmir issue the policy will always be will be under the policy of army only. I mean, army will call the shots in this. But whether it's coming to the economy, it is internal security. Army is involved. I mean, this Baluchistan issue, SSG is involved. Special forces are being involved to, they do not have some internal security teams who are catering these issues. Then in politics as well, they always jiggle between different parties. So first they popped up Imran Khan to put down Nawaz Sharif. Now his brother is on and Imran Khan is down. So this issue of politics, whether the people of Pakistan understands this, or they are in awe of Pakistani army still?
No, clearly they're no longer in awe of the Pakistan army, which is what we are seeing. One of the things the army seeks, apart from everything you mentioned, its dominating, overwhelming presence, is it seeks legitimacy. It tries to be that mysterious force that is a more legitimate force and tries to paint the civilian politicians as corrupt or inefficient or both. But that facade has fallen in the last few years, and particularly thanks to Imran Khan, because he started life as an army puppet, but at somewhere along the line, from 2018, around 2021, 22, 21, he realized that he was not being allowed to run the country, and he wanted to exercise his autonomy as the civilian leader, and the army didn't like that. So they got rid of him and therefore put up a regime, despite him winning the election a year later, last year. They formed a regime of Shehbaz Sharif on the people, but it is clear to the people what was done, and the support remains with Imran Khan, and therefore there's a strong anti-army mood in the country. If you had a referendum tomorrow on the army, it would be a thumbs down from the people. If you had a popularity vote, it would probably be Imran Khan winning, and that would be partly a pro-Imran, but also partly a anti-army sentiment. So clearly, it's not the most popular force, but it happens in autocracies that you may not be the most popular, but you're the most powerful, and therefore you can run the country.
Okay, sir. And sir, what about the supporters? I mean, the breath givers to Pakistan, whether it's Saudi, China, or US. So, how do they see Imran Khan? Why do they do not like Imran Khan, and that's why letting army decide who should be the prime minister?
All these three countries, and in fact, most countries outside, will be pragmatic about it, and they would have no love lost for Imran Khan, for the simple reason that countries try to maximize their interests, and they know that the Pakistan is run by the army, however inefficiently or however unjustly, but it is the army in charge. So they would deal with the government of the day, which is the army and its whoever its junior partner is at that point of time. So if it was Imran Khan and the army running the country from 2018 to 21, they were dealing with them. But if it was Shehbaz Sharif and the army now leading the country, they will be dealing with the government of the day. So I don't think any outside power will see an interest in trying to change the internal reality of Pakistan and try to prop up Imran Khan against the army, because it doesn't serve anyone's purpose to do that.
Okay, so so they take the product and do not indulge in the process.
Absolutely, because they feel that, it's like dealing with China or Russia. You deal with the leader of the day. You don't try to wish or try to change anything internally. That is an internal process that will go on there.
Yeah, so but it maybe it is in the news that always US is always interfering in the political affairs and trying to meddle with the civilian government. So that's why they say that US is always interfering. Okay, so coming to the security issue now, but on the western front of the Pakistan, 2021, everyone thought that once Taliban is in power in Afghanistan, there will be Kashmir 2.0 in of 90s, and all the Afghan and foreign fighters would come into Kashmir and create a security issue for India. But there was totally a different thing. I mean, Taliban Pakistan is creating ruckus in Pakistan, and there is no rise in Afghan insurgents. I mean, Afghan terrorists in India. Was there a strategic miscalculation on the part of Afghanistan because they were celebrating of Taliban coming in Afghanistan?
Yes, so strategic miscalculation on the part of Pakistan, certainly. And if you compare the moment of August 2021, when the Taliban uh, came over almost overnight and the Americans left in a hurry, you've had a situation where the Pakistan expectation was that this would be like Taliban 1.0 of the 90s, which means it becomes a sort of a proxy for the ISI, and the ISI gets very involved in running the day-to-day affairs of the Taliban. But clearly, this was a different Taliban. It wanted to assert its strategic autonomy. It had a different view of the world. And what it said was that it wasn't going to play according to the playbook of the Pakistan ISI. So there were broadly three expectations of the Taliban that the Pakistan had. One, that they would recognize the Durand line. This has been an enduring kind of problem that the Pashtuns see Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and beyond as part of their natural homeland and don't recognize that border. Two, they would control the TTP, which was, part of the Taliban to begin with, but it became a force which became completely, hostile to Pakistan and attacked it. So they expected the Afghan Taliban to control the Pakistani Taliban, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. And thirdly, they expected the Taliban to keep India out because, the strategic culture of Pakistan had become one of paranoia about Indian involvement in Afghanistan, that India was there, India would threaten them, India would have a pincer move against them. So all these three assumptions proved wrong. After 3 years, we see that the TTP is not controlled by the Afghan Taliban. They are saying, these are your people. They're telling the Pakistanis, you deal with them. The Durand line has not been recognized, and India is not out. India is the Taliban are willing to pragmatically engage with India and give it assurances and look for some sort of assurances from India on particularly on humanitarian aid and allowing Afghans to come to India and so on. So I think you're right when you say that it was a miscalculation because the expectation was wrong and the reality has unfolded in a very different direction.
Yes, sir. So, but when we compare India's involvement in Afghanistan with Pakistan's help to the Afghan refugees, so usually I see Pakistani street news channels when the people of Afghan and Pakistani, you know, communicate with each other, and Pakistanis are all usually have a point that हमने आपको बैठा के खिलाया है इतने साल. But at the same time, we have refugees in Afghanistan. We have refugees from Afghanistan in Delhi, and we created parliament for them. So we kind of expected to win the hearts of the Afghans. But Pakistan also claimed that in the meantime, the Americans, Ashraf Ghani and Karzai was there. They were also trying to win the hearts of the Afghans in Pakistan only. But why then Afghans have a hate towards the Pakistani national aspect? We see them in Pakistani cricket matches as well. They start fighting with each other, but not for the Indians.
So that is the reality, and you have to ask yourself why that happened. The reality is that the people of Afghanistan don't like the Pakistan state because they seem to have seen through the double game that Pakistan played at different points of time. They also see the goodwill that India has created through various humanitarian projects, through not threatening the Afghans in any way and being a largely benign presence and not being an immediate neighbor. So I think that difference is fairly obvious to the Afghans, and they see no benefit coming to them directly from Pakistan, despite the fact, as you said, that Pakistan hosts a large number of Afghan refugees, but it feels that it did it to its own advantage. It played the game with the US, where it was trying to play the game with both sides. The other problem that emanates from Pakistan's point of view from Afghanistan with the TTP not being controlled is that the TTP has been the biggest challenge. Today, we are talking of the BLA because we've are have just faced a terrorism attack. But the TTP, in a sense, is tactically coalescing with the other insurgencies in Pakistan. So they are in touch with the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, the PTM in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They are in touch with the Baloch Liberation Army. And Pakistan suspects that all these forces are coalescing because they have a common enemy in the Pakistan army and presents a huge challenge. So that is the shape of the security challenge that Pakistan faces on its west. The coalescing of all these forces which have grievances against the Pakistan state, that is the biggest challenge that Pakistan faces.
Okay, sir. Okay. So basically, this will be last long wing. So for the Pakistanis. So sir, coming to the ideological problems in Pakistan. I mean, there have been a lot of madrasas teaching in. I mean, Jamaat ud Dawa has some madrasas, and every terrorist organization have a face organization which are running madrasas and ideologically creating a different set of people. Same with the state education system. We remember, sir. I mean, we both, me and Sumer, have been a civil service aspirants, and so we used to see earlier that we do not take Pakistan as an enemy. We still do not take Pakistan as officially enemy country. But the Pakistan, on the other hand, from the very beginning, teaches their children that specifically India and even targeting the religious element that they are our enemies, whether it is Jewish, whether it is Hindus. So how do you see that this problem will ever be solved? Because you are, what do you say, the seed में ही problem हो रही है अगर. तो फिर long term में how do they see solution with good relations with their neighbors?
Absolutely. So I would answer that at two levels. What you're raising are, the issues of ideology, which is something that the Pakistan state deployed to define its nationalism, which many post-colonial countries or new countries do, that you have to define your national identity and you try to define it in a way. But in Pakistan's case, it wasn't organic. The army decided that it was also the arbiter of the ideological boundaries or the defender of the ideological boundaries of Pakistan and not just the physical boundaries. And what it started doing is playing a political role in developing an ideology. So that ideology had many strands. One was religion. So Ziaul Haq in the 80s decided to come very close to the religious parties and take Pakistan in a very Islamist direction, and therefore identify the army's ideology with the religious right. Similarly, the whole idea of an anti-Indianism or a paranoia about Indian is also been something cultivated by the army because it is convenient to exaggerate the India threat in order to rally people behind the flag and to demonstrate its use and its legitimacy. So basically, as Benazir Bhutto said and tried, the civilians have often tried to tell the army that the civilians should define the ideological frontiers and you should defend the physical frontiers of Pakistan. But the army decided to do all of that. And therefore, it manufactured a synthetic sort of narrative about Pakistan, which was not really close to the truth, but which was very ideological and which pushed Pakistan in completely the wrong direction.
Yes, sir. So, sir, you being there for 3 years, and so have you ever personally felt the sense of otherization being an Indian? Of course, they could not do to a diplomat, but within the people, within the streets, if you met civilians or bureaucrats, not just, I mean, bureaucrats would not be able to do that, but civilians, do they have some kind of hate? I mean, I want to hear from the mouth, first-hand information of yours. Do they have this problem of otherization that you are an Indian, we cannot be friends? Because there are two set of people. Like I mean, the security czars of India totally explains us that there has been otherization. They do not like Indians. We see that in our cricket field. We see our cricketers telling the old stories of Pakistani cricketers trying to convert in that. But then there is Bollywood integration. There is lovey-dovey relationship on the uh, Bollywood side or the music industry side. So how do we differentiate? Like, what is the actual mood of the Pakistani population there?
So, I would say that is part of the paradox of Pakistan. There is an official ideology being pushed on the people, a synthetic narrative about India being the other or India being a threat, and and that is not bought by a lot of people. So a lot of people you will meet when you go to Pakistan do not buy that because they feel that this is something being artificially imposed on them. They won't be able to go on television and say that because they feel they'll be victimized. But at a personal level, they don't really believe it because they are engaging with people of different religions, different cultures, particularly the elites who are traveling overseas, and they don't see too much of a difference. Also, I would say something is changing in terms of the youth. People of your generation in Pakistan, if you see people, your counterparts who are doing shows on social media or podcasts and others, do not carry the same hostility towards India because they don't feel the need to, manufacture this natural enemy. So there may be some elements of the rivalry because the poison of the narrative seeps into society, right? It goes into the textbooks. If you're taught every day कि ये दुश्मन देश है, and you sometimes retain parts of that narrative. But by and large, people who think for themselves, and particularly young people, they have the same aspirations on both sides. They do not see India as the enemy country. They see India as the estranged neighbor whom they can't communicate with. But the hostility is largely at the official level. The belief in Kashmir Banega Pakistan is largely at the official level. If you talk to common people, and if you talk, to the elites in particular, they have no deep interest in this narrative, and they don't really buy it.
So, talking about Kashmir, as far as I mean, my research is correct. You were there when the Article 370 was removed.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. So what is the mood? I mean, officially they say that we do not accept the removal of Article 370, but officially do they have accepted within the circles of Pakistan that yes, it is not a thing to come back, and we have to look for our occupied part, that how we are going to save it. I mean, I don't want them to save it, but I'm just asking from a perspective of a Pakistani uh, politician.
Yes, so if you see the narratives, they this has been something. The reality of the last 7 decades is something that is clear to Pakistan, and even in the past, it was ascribed to senior Pakistani leaders that we can't take Pakistan, India, we can't take Kashmir, India can't won't give it to us. So let's find some solutions. And in the past, there have been attempts to find solutions, even in the times of Ayub Khan, but also in the time of Musharraf, to say that we can't take Kashmir anyway by force. But also is the factor is that large parts of Pakistan don't believe in this great Kashmir narrative that we are incomplete without Kashmir. This is an official narrative, which political leaders will find very hard to say anything opposed to that. But more and more after Article 370 2019, the reality is becoming clear that that India will not be reversing the kind of decisions it has made on Jammu and Kashmir. It is too well integrated in India. At best, there could be a conversation about borders. And as you're saying, from India's point of view, as the parliamentary resolution of 94 says, that it is about reclaiming POK. And Pakistan will talk about, having a referendum or UN kind of solutions to the part of Jammu and Kashmir with India. But clearly, uh, at the level of the people, at the level of intellectuals in Pakistan, there is no great fervor for Kashmir that there used to be in the past.
Okay, so finally they have accepted it. So that is the
Yes, so a lot of people accept the reality of the differential in power, the differential, and India's commitment to Jammu and Kashmir.
so I would have my last question, and then I think Sumedh also want to ask you a question, and we are already approaching 1:30. So one question. I mean, so there are two sets of I would say thoughts I have understood or read while doing my research is that if any case the Pakistan breaks into different provinces, whether it is Baloch or the northern provinces or the Sindhi Desh and all that, there are two sets of in India. One says that there will be a program of migration from the eastern front, I mean the eastern borders to India, and one says that they will not come here, they will stay there. And I mean, how do you see it? Whether the breaking of Pakistan, if it happens, will that be a problem of migration for India, like we saw in Bangladesh in the initial part?
You see, it's impossible to predict the nature of an unraveling of a country, right? It's impossible to predict whether that will happen, when that will happen, and how that will happen. But it's important to understand the kind of scenarios that could happen. And one lesson that history teaches you is that breakups of countries are never clean and neat and orderly, right? They can be chaotic. So there can be all kinds of chaos unleashed in a scenario of a breakup of Pakistan. And what we need to debate is whether that would be in the interest of India, or how that could affect India, and whether that will be something negative or something positive. And so multiple scenarios exist. There could be a scenario certainly where in a situation of complete breakdown of the kind you saw in Sri Lanka because of economic reasons, or the kind of regime change you saw in Bangladesh, if the people are on the streets and they overthrow the army, for instance, would that have an impact on India? Could there be large scale migration? There could be. We need to be prepared for and at least understand that there could be a scenario of that nature. And there's a separate debate on whether that would be in the interest of India. I think it's in the interest of India that terrorism stops. And that is in India's interest. It shouldn't matter to India how it stops and what shape Pakistan takes. But the key question that has been a policy worry for India in the last 3 decades is that how can cross-border terrorism come to a standstill, become zero, and in what circumstances can that happen, and how can that be a gain that can be consolidated, consolidating the trend of the last few years.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Over to you, Sumedh, your question.
Good afternoon, sir. I was listening to the entire conversation and it was very insightful. Thank you for your insights. And it is very great that you left at cross-border terrorism because the only question that I had was with regards to cross-border terrorism. So this was a general observation that I've made that with dollar as the global reserve currency, the Americans had the supreme power over all the financial networks, and they used the maximum pressure policy on Iran to cut down all the finances that Iran was doing to, let's say, Hezbollah, Houthis, or Hamas, and the entire nexus, uh, without the support of an international reserve currency, and with uh, big players like US and China on their side, on the side of Pakistan, we have been very able and capable of limiting the expansion of Pakistan-based terror groups that are focused particularly on India by not, having them have that capability to threaten us the way Hezbollah has been threatening Israel on a daily basis with barrages of rockets, drones, and missiles. So, from your perspective, how have we been able to counter this throughout all these years, despite not having the financial power that the Americans had?
So several parts of that question. What You don't need the financial power to be able to have that conversation. And one of the differences, if you say that Iran's proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis were being used against Israel, there's a difference here in Pakistan. Every Pakistan really can't be claiming these are proxies. That era has gone. That there's no longer plausible deniability that Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and Hizbul Mujahideen are not sword arms of the ISI, right? No one believes that they can be in Pakistan and not be complicit with the Pakistan state. So India is dealing with the Pakistan state and not really with proxies. Uh, but what they try to be have deniability and say that these are non-state actors, but this is no longer accepted by India or for that matter for the world. So what we have is we've been using it, particularly in the last decade, are the instruments against that terrorism which we counter directly. So we've been countering it from the beginning of the century with our diplomacy, with our conversations with global partners, highlighting this terrorism, but more directly in recent times. So 2016, the surgical strikes, 2019, the air strikes, we directly countered terrorism as part of Indian policy. And that had an impact. So, touch wood, since 2019, there's been no spectacular act of terrorism. Now, it's another matter that there can be terrorism happening at a lower scale beneath India's threshold. But what India as policy would like to achieve with Pakistan is that can this cross-border infiltration and cross-border terror go down to zero? And what is the right set of policies to follow? Does that come from engaging with Pakistan? Does it come from not engaging with Pakistan? Does it come from doing global diplomacy? Or does it come only from using hard power? These are the policy choices that Indian policymakers have and will have to make in the next few years.
And out of all the four choices that you just listed, we have almost tried everything multiple times. And yet we are not able to find a perfect combination of which is to be used when to reduce it down to zero. But that's again, as you just concluded in the entire talk, it's a complexity that roots out from Pakistan, not from India. So it's more of them to solve it than us. So that would be it from my side, sir. Thank you so much for your insights, and it was a pleasure to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Wonderful talking to you. And it's good that you're having such deep conversations on these complex issues because I think that is where good policy nuance, good understanding comes from doing a deep dive into these issues.
So,
Thank you, sir.
well, we are honored to have you as our first Indian Foreign Service officer, sir. And
Yes, sir.
we already hosted a lot of military personnel. So, at the last, I would just like to ask, I mean, we would request you to also shed some light later on when you get time on Bangladesh and specifically on Canada, as you have served there as well. So, whenever you have time, we would be happy to host you again. And if you would like to suggest some of your colleagues to have discussion with us on this, because it will be helpful for us. And uh, anything would you like to suggest? Aspirants like us, we have also been in Indian Foreign Service aspirants, and we are still into the process, but also exploring this direction.
Excellent, excellent. Do what you're doing. I think it's important to have these in-depth conversations. You can, of course, there are a lot of folks who are talking, who are in writing about it. Obviously, there'll be people who've retired from the government because while you're in government, you are bound by being, the spokesman of the government. So you're not really giving an analyst viewpoint, but you could be talking to people who've retired and people who served in those areas. So just see the newspapers. A lot of people are writing, and you can approach them and ask them to talk to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank
Jai Hind,
you.
sir.
thank you.
Jai
Jai Hind, sir.
Hind. Bye.